It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine? It's a beautiful day in Pennsylvania, and I'm so glad to be with you today. I'm Michael Ray Smith. Some people call me Smitty, some people call me McSmitty, and it's my delight to be with you in this virtual conference for Evangelical Press Association. I thank Lamar Keener and the board for allowing me to speak to you today about deadline reporting. You'll hear me say, the formula works over and over again. The formula works. It will help you write faster and get that story out of the valley of despair onto the highway of hope, to quote an old bromide. You'll hear me talk about some steps that you can use to prepare quickly and then do the interview. You'll hear me talk about the notebook method that I picked up from Bob DeBill of USA Today. It is a tool that I think will help you in your reporting if you care to use it. And then we'll talk about just writing in general. Let me share with you a PowerPoint presentation that I put together. I'm assuming that it will be available to you later today, or perhaps even now. Deadline writing and ways to cut corner, but not sacrifice accuracy. The formula works. Deadline reporting is a bit like a zombie. One zombie is scary. A row of zombies, that's a deadline. Ba-dum. Thank you, Lamar. Many of you work for magazines, and so you have a bit of lead time before you submit your polished article. So you have a long time to write, but there are days when an editor needs an article right away. And perhaps it's going up on the web, something very timely. And this presentation may help you with that. I have a friend who works for National Geographic. He has a whole year. Imagine that, right? Well, the expectation would be pretty great that that is a fine piece of prose. What if you're on deadline? How are you going to get this done? Deadline, you probably know that that word appeared as early as the Civil War, maybe even earlier. And the idea was the prisoners were in a somewhat open area, and the guards would draw a circle around the prisoners and say, this is the line, don't cross this, or you'll be at risk. It's also a word that's used in publications to mean the edge of the page, where you would not want to go beyond that area to try to print. So that's a little background on the idea of a deadline. Now back to the formula. This formula works best when you're on deadline, but some of these ideas can be transferred to all kinds of writing. For instance, these different steps, the steps when you're preparing an article. Most of you are using some kind of browser to do background information, and that's fine. You can find a lot of good information using Google or one of the other search engines. Have you tried this Google Scholar? I put it in Lamar Keener's name and just searched to see what I'd come up with, and came across this piece from Liberty Champion, and it's a quote by Lamar about some kind of event, and he says it was never meant to be a popularity contest. Well, that's one place, Google Scholar. And if you want to drill a little deeper, you could go to Nexus Uni. Now, this is a website that was, or a database that was associated with LexisNexis. If you've not ever used that, I highly recommend it. It will give you full text of articles in major publications on the topic in which you're searching. So for instance, if you were looking at Evangelical Press Association, put that in the browser and you'd come up with many, many articles. How do you get it? Well, sometimes you have to go to a public library, sometimes it has to be a university library. It's a very expensive database, but it's so good. It will enrich your research when you prepare an article. You may know that many universities allow you to pay a fee, and then you can use their databases remotely. Totally worth it. I put Lamar Keener's name in Nexus Uni and came up with an article about evangelical press cessation, just for instance, to show you how it works. Step one, you got to prepare. Step two, the interview questions. Many of us are so confident that we can show up for an interview, make that phone call, and have very limited understanding of what exactly we're going to ask. As a matter of fact, when I teach undergraduates, and I'll say, call so-and-so and check on such and such. And they'll say, well, I don't know that person. I know, just call them, introduce yourself. Well, then what do I say? So, you're not there. You're way beyond that. My suggestion is take a minute or two and develop some interview questions. You may not get to all of them, but it will help during that lull in the conversation where you're wondering, where should I go next? Again, deadline pressure makes people get antsy. And sometimes your 8 cylinders in your brain shut down to about 2. So having some questions in advance can really help. By the way, while I'm talking about the interview, let me just mention in passing, when you're interviewing people face to face, I think it's valuable to have a pause and let it hang there for a few seconds. When you get a minute or a few seconds, just count in your head 6 seconds. You feel that? That was like a 2-second interval. And that sometimes helps your source want to fill in the space, and you'll get better information than you even thought. Step 1, prepare. Step 2, develop those questions, conduct the interview, and now you're ready to write. It's time to write, but you're on deadline. How much time do you have? Let's say have you ever had just 60 minutes to write a piece? Most of us have. And so you're thinking, I got to arrange this thing. I got my main source here. I got a couple of secondary sources. What's my lead? All these questions are going through your mind. And that's why I say, use the formula. The formula works. This is not my idea. This is based on journalists for the last, how long? Years and years and years. So let me give you this acronym that really doesn't do what I wanted to do. I was trying to make it be a word. LAQN, the formula. What does it mean? It means that in your article, if you can sometimes just get started, the rest of it falls into place. So the first paragraph, it's the lead. You know that, first paragraph. Second sentence, often you amplify the lead. Give the additional information that makes the lead make sense. Then this is a beauty. I learned this from, I hate to tell you, Gannett, which is a huge group of newspapers these days. But the training was quite good. They said, put a quotation in paragraph 3 from your main source. You see how that's a formula? Like you're looking through your notebook. I don't know where to start. Well, what the heck? You know you're going to use this main source. Find one great quote from her. That goes in paragraph 3. Then circle another quote from her. End with that quote. Artistic unity. And then the nut graph. Every article should have a nut graph. What do you mean? It's a background paragraph. It's the essential information. It's part of the 5 W's that we all know so well. Kipling said, I have 5 faithful friends. Their names are who, what, where, why, and when. And then we add the how. So first paragraph lead, second paragraph, amplify the lead, go to the quotation, third paragraph, fourth paragraph, background. So what should that lead be? Well, it's often a summary lead, but it's part of the formula, and the formula works. So let's drill down a little bit. Here's a quick review. That lead sentence will lead to the amplification, then the quotation, the background paragraph, and then you might have an opposing quotation. Transition, you go back to the main source, transition, you get the flow. A, B, you got it? One source A, second source B, first source A, second source B. The summary lead, who did what? Just plug it in. Make sure you include some of the 5 W's. Now, if you want to do a New York Times piece, you could have a lead as many as 40 or 50 words. Wall Street Journal does it as well. I think that can be tricky because the reader may get weary of too much information. So you might have to break it down, but you could do that. You could have a big summary paragraph followed by an amplification paragraph. Let's take a look at how this looks in an example. This is based on an article I read in the community newspaper in this area. It's called The Record Herald, and it's in Waynesboro, Pennsylvania. We're not too far from Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and we're about at least 100 miles from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So I've modified this. Let's look at the first paragraph. And so I'm going to call this the summary graph as part of our formula. American Legion Post 15 has officially risen from the ashes. Not quite a full summary lead, but it gives you the who did what. Now I want to amplify it. A grand opening celebration held Saturday included veterans, legislators, and others at the new headquarters at 100 Main Street in your town. Now I'm going to go to paragraph 3, my quotation. To me, this is a milestone of a lifetime, says Post 15 Commander Bill Everyman. Now I'm going to transition, paragraph 4, my background paragraph, the essential information I need to know so this story makes sense. This is my nut graph. A fire destroyed the previous building December 28th, 2017. Well ensured, the structure was rebuilt with many of the Post's 200 members contributing to the reconstruction. The 19,000 square foot building cost about $2 million. Now we're all set up for an opposing quote. We could go to a transition, but I think an opposing quote will work just fine here. The American Legion is an important asset, but the cost made me raise my eyebrows, said James Critic, one of the members who wanted to avoid a building program, and suggested using a nearby building for meetings. So there is, in a quick way, how this would come together. Again, when you're writing on deadline, sometimes you can put that quotation, paragraph 3, you already have got your story started. You are a writer, you're a creative person. That's probably why you got into this business. You like the idea of words and playing with images. You're going to have to suppress the desire to be creative when you're on deadline. The idea is you got to get it done. You got to get it done correctly. We don't want to have to put a correction either in the publication or online. And by the way, if you do make a mistake, please correct it, right? That's a godly thing to do. It happens. We make mistakes. But for this deadline reporting idea, I would just say resist the urge to put a feature lead on your piece or put a lot of featurey flourishes in it. What are some obstacles to writing? Even with the formula, what are some obstacles? Well, sometimes people do get stuck on the lead. And I'm suggesting if that should happen, forget the opening and just go plug in the different things you know you need. Paragraph 3, a quotation. Paragraph 4, background information. Use your 5 W's. The idea is to finish, do it fast, and then go back and edit it and write your lead. Got that? Remember, the formula works. How many of you do free writing? Have you ever done that? The idea is you don't type when you're free writing. You get paper, pen, lead pencil, set a timer on your smartphone, or maybe you have an egg timer, and set it for like 5 minutes, no more than 10, because you're on deadline. You don't want to waste time, but set the timer and force yourself to compose off the top of your head. free write. It's nonstop writing. If you don't know what to write, just say, I don't know what to write. I don't know what to write. I don't know what to write. But the idea is you want to probe your mind, mine your mind for hidden thoughts about what you observed. Finish the piece, and then you can start editing. In other words, do not edit your free writing. For that 5 minutes, just let it flow and see what you come up with. You may not come up with anything, but the idea is you dump your notebook and just start writing. Try it, see if you like it. Let's talk about the reporting business. How many of you have a Rolodex? Remember these Rolodexes from years ago? I doubt if too many people have them these days. I think I have about 3 or 4. Sometimes they're on a big wheel. So these days, people have a digital equivalent, a Google Doc with sources. I highly recommend this. For your newsroom, you create the Google Doc with sources from different stories that people have written. And then anybody in the newsroom can go to that Google Doc and you have the phone number, contact information, maybe some background on the person. And now you have a source you could go to when your back's against the wall and you have to finish this thing on deadline. When you go anywhere, I suggest you'd get a business card, collect business cards, and then write on the business card information that will help you later. Many of you have contacts around the world, contacts that probably the mainstream press does not have, missionary contacts. My old pal, Terry Mattingly, has been in the business for a career. And he's the one that explained that when you're trying to find out what's happening in a far-flung area, missionaries sometimes can be very helpful. We have to be cautious. A lot of missionaries do not want their name mentioned in print or spoken on broadcast. So check it out, obviously, depending on the nature of the piece. If it's too sensitive, then you use that person for background. When you get these business cards, may I suggest you write on the back of the card the date you received the card, the venue, where were you when you picked up the card, maybe a short description of the source. If you have a bit of artistic ability, maybe draw a picture of the guy or the woman, and then add the specific area of the source's expertise. When you're doing it digitally, I suggest you list the person by the function, not necessarily by the name. So my smartphone, I list the business owner that works for me, and he's an electrician. I list him as an electrician. I don't look him up by his name, John, electrician, right? So that might help you in your digital Rolodex. Here's Bob DeMille's idea, the notebook with sections. You remember these notebooks you used to use in undergrad school or graduate school? Now this was fairly thin, but you've seen them where they have different sections. And this would work. Now, many of you use a reporter's notebook, about the size of a business envelope, number 10, I think it is. Put it in your sport jacket pocket, in your purse, and you pull it out and you write, flip the page, turn the notebook, write some more, pull it up. Great way to go. And that's fine. But often we run out of those guys, and this guy will do the thing. And so if you have one of the old school types with the different tabs, this would work well for what I'm about to explain. The first section would be notes for today's article. And so you have your notebook, you flip it open, and you just write your notes. And that's the first section. That's for today. You're on deadline. Then the second section is for quotations for another article. In other words, that is a section where you put quotations that you can't use for today's article, but they might be valuable for another article for another day. So imagine you're on deadline, right? I need a quote. Let me go to my section on quotations. Is there anything in here that will work for this story? Third section, sources for another story. So you're doing an article Your main source gives you some names to call. And again, your back's against the wall. You don't have time to call these people, but you put them in the third section of your notebook. And maybe you can use them when you need a source and you're on deadline. And finally, the fourth section is for ideas for another story. And that happens, right? Some people call it the futures file. You put something that came up in the interview in that fourth section. You're not going to use that idea today. You're going to use it possibly for another day. That first section, the notebook. This is where you put your notes for today's story. Before you leave the interview, take a minute and scan your notes. Circle the best quotations. You know probably in advance who will be the main source, but that one quotation goes in paragraph 3, save another quotation to end your piece. You see, you're plugging stuff in. It will make you more efficient as a reporter. Make sure you check the facts. Be sure to get contact information, email, cell phone, and tell your source, I'm working on this story right away. I may have some questions in a few minutes. May I call you back? May I check my quotes? Oh my goodness. Can't tell you how many times I said to a source, I'll be calling you to check my quotations. And almost every time the source says, thank you. I don't know if anyone's ever done that before with my quotations. So yeah, I want to get it right. You know, we're under a lot of scrutiny these days. I mean, media bias, isn't that what we hear all the time? So let's get it right the first time. Now your source may get it wrong, but do your best to not report inaccurate information. Sometimes you have to check your source to see if he or she got it right. But let's be very precise and fact-oriented. Okay, your second section. This is where you put those quotes that you couldn't use on the article you're writing today. You're preparing for that day, your back's against the wall. You've got to write on deadline. And there may be a quote in the second section that you could use for your deadline piece. So when you're on deadline, you need a breezy quotation. Check section 2, or a source, section 3. See how that could work for you? The quotation section. So this is our second section. Make a point of saving quotations. Put unused quotations in another section of your notebook, section 2. If you have to, cut out pages of your notebook. Just cut them out and put them in that quotation part of your notebook. Let me give you an example of how this works. Let's just say you are interviewing a mail carrier. Let's pick something innocuous, summer versus winter uniforms. So you spend the day showing him or her, just shadowing the person. Do you ever do that? Oh my goodness. You spend 1 hour with a source, you get a lot of information. You spend an entire day with a source, you'll get lots of information, and it'll be so rich in detail. You spend a week with that person, and you feel like you have unlocked hidden treasures. My friend, perhaps your friend, Marvin Alaska of World Magazine, he says to watch people move through space. If you spend some time with somebody, like a full day, if your publication has the liberty to let you do that, you will get rich information. You watch them move through space. They meet other people when they're walking across a campus, and you see people say hello, and you see how this person interacts with those people. Watch them move through space. So you spend a day shadowing this mail carrier, and he casually mentions something associated with the government that is mailed one particular day a month, third Thursday, fourth Friday. And you realize that has nothing to do with today's article, but you park that. You park perhaps quotations, section 2, perhaps sources, section 3, and you might use it for another day. So save the quote from the postal carrier, and maybe you can use it or the source's name for a later article. Your third section, this is where you put information about the sources we just mentioned. Scan your notebook. Quickly scan for someone who is quotable. Now you're in the third part of your notebook. Ask yourself, could this source help me with a piece I'm working on today on deadline? Now, if this person is just a phone call away, boom, you got it. You call that person, you don't delay, you call today. Sometimes you have to use email. And that's probably what's going to happen if you're on deadline. Your back's against the wall. You don't have time to do a face-to-face interview. I think the email interview has its place, but it's so much better if you can talk to that source face-to-face. Now, maybe you're talking to people all over the country and it's unrealistic, but could you do a Zoom call or something so you can watch their face and how they get animated, or you'll pick up cues about how their office is arranged, you follow? So that's just another idea. The fourth section, this section probably will not help you for your deadline writing, but it may irrigate your thinking to finish today's piece on time. You may get some ideas to finish your piece on deadline. Obstacles, we were talking about obstacles. What should you avoid? Well, sometimes you know where your article's going. You can sit at the keyboard and before you know it, you're finished. However, it may be profitable to take a big pause. You whisper a prayer, Heavenly Father, help me with this piece. I want to do it justice. I want to get it right. Pray, you take a 5-minute walk. Maybe you drink a cup of coffee or a beverage of your choice. Just relax for a minute. Norm Rohr, he was a giant in the publishing industry, particularly for the faith-based press. He said that when he worked in advertising, he and his friend would stand on their heads to get fresh blood going to their brain. I don't know if it really works, but anything that can help you think you're making progress helps. Again, breathe, and then get to it. I'm going to give you a bonus section. I don't know too many people that do this, but I recommend it. In your notebook, create a page or 2 or 3 or a whole section on picturesque speech. Now you can do this on the computer too, have a whole file just on lines that you think are fun. I read this novelist, Terry Pratchett. He died a couple years ago. He's written more than 150 novels, and some of them are juvenile novels. That's okay, right? Think about C.S. Lewis. What do people know him for? They know him for mere Christianity, but many people think about Chronicles of Narnia. So juvenile fiction is not to be scorned. So one of his novels, Terry Pratchett said, hollow as a tunnel. I like that phrase. You may not. I like it. A desert wind can suck it dry. Wine-colored sea. So how does this work for you? You're on deadline. You got a section in your notebook. I call it the bonus section. And you have picturesque speech. Can you take some of these phrases, turn them a little bit, make up your own, and use them in your writing? Here's another one from novelist and journalist Carl Hiaasen. He wrote a piece this year called Squeeze Me. It's fiction. It's based in South Florida and the island of Palm Beach, where Donald Trump has Mar-a-Lago, once called the Winter White House. And it's a fun story about pythons that have escaped and are terrorizing Palm Beach Island. Carl Hiaasen called one of the characters seasonally Catholic. Isn't that a great line? I think that's fun. How about this? These are a couple of my favorites. Explosion of hair. I mean, I just think about Einstein, maybe my own hair. I don't know. It was an explosion. Or words escaped his mouth like a flock of birds. You like that phrase? I like it. Here's old Norm Rohr, the late Norm Rohr. He was a writing coach, and he said to take cliches. We don't want to use cliches, right? They're trite. Take those cliches and work them around. So you've heard the line, I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. Well, Norm Rohr says, how about mixing it up? I come to carve turkey, not to baste it. So even in your picturesque speech, you can play around with phrases like that. And then on Deadline, you use them. Possibly. Here's another Rohr line. When you come to the end of your rope, tie a knot of hope in it. Isn't that a great line? I like that. I don't know if you could use it in Deadline reporting, but you are a wordsmith. This is what you do for a living. You like words. You want to have fun with words. That's our currency. How about this one? You can use something from your notebook, a picturesque speech, and this unknown writer wrote, autumn is leaves hang gliding in the wind. That's a fun piece, isn't it? Okay, you're still in a jam, but imagine the opposite. Imagine, old school now, in journalism, we used to talk in terms of inches. So when I worked for Gannett, they like to keep things tight. Think of USA Today style. You might have a 12-inch story, but maybe you're just shy and they have the space. They want to put 12 inches in there and you only have 10. What do? Or think about the digital equivalent. Somebody says we need 1,200 words and you only have 1,100. They say, no, I need 1,200. Now, in layout and design, you can play around with your measures to get it to work. But let's say you really want to try to hit the goal. You want 1,200. All right, what are you going to do? You've run out of material. Your notebook you've used everything from your notebook. You've used everything from your other parts of your notebook. How about color, observation? And I would encourage you to use color in every article. It may not work when your back's against the wall, but certainly keep it in mind. What are you going to do? How am I going to make this color work? Okay, imagine you left your office and you drove to visit your source. The drive to the source. What do you see? Is it a cityscape with tarmac and concrete and traffic noises and skyscrapers? Tell us how that looks. How about the weather? Is it an overcast day, cloudy, blue skies? How does it look? The office, you go into the office. What's on the desk? What's on the walls? What do you hear? You hear a tapping of keys, the air conditioning system, conversations that are hushed. What do you hear? Help the reader see and hear what you see and hear. Or in the rare case, they perhaps give you some coffee and you taste it and the story has something to do with caffeine. And you can put taste in there too. Or fabrics, maybe they're showing you fabrics that you can describe how it feels. Now, these are just some ideas, and obviously you have ideas that are better. And I hope we can hear from you in the next few minutes. But if all else fails, dial a lead. I need some investors. Let's start a business called Dial a Lead, all right? And so a frustrated journalist, writer calls us and says, hey, I'm just tapped out. I need a lead. And we help them out. Well, of course, that would never work, right? But I'd be happy to talk to you. I really would. We can work together. And probably there's some people with the EPA that would be willing to do that as well. So there's my name and telephone number, my email, and my website. So at this point, we'll either have a discussion or not. So I'll leave you with this. When you're writing, remember those steps. It's crucial to do that research, even on Deadline. And then remember the notebook method. Try it. It might be valuable, it may not be. And finally, remember, the formula works. The formula works. Well, thanks for a chance to be with you today. I hope you have a great conference and stay in touch. The formula works.